And now the other type of tafsir, tafsir bil-ra'i, of course that was highly controversial in the early years. And there's clearly a type of tafsir bil-ra'i, tafsir by opinion, that is invalid and it's a transgression against the Qur'an. And then there is a type that's lawful and valuable. What you find is that there are some books of tafsir bil-ma'thur which are purely ma'thur. If you find a tafsir that's purely tafsir bil-ra'i, then you know that that's going to be deviant. Most tafsirs are a combination of ma'thur and ra'i, and they fall along a continuum. Some are more weighted on the narration side, and some are more weighted on the opinion side, but they all contain, most of them contain some of both. Now, let's turn to the tafsir of Abdur-Razzaaq. Abdur-Razzaaq al-San'ani, who, like I said, he was a teacher of Imam Ahmad. He was from Yemen. His tafsir, if we just look at Surah Al-Fatiha, his tafsir is completely bil-ma'thur. He has nothing to say from himself. It's just narrations. And we see that this feature of tafsir bil-ma'thur is very prominent in his book, the feature of being just sort of like little pieces of a mosaic. You get the sense that there's something much larger there, and you're only getting little pieces. Just as an example, we're going to just look at his tafsir of Surah Al-Fatiha. He has a total of 3 narrations on Al-Fatiha. With regard to Maliki Yawm al-Din, the isnad we have here is Al-Hasan ibn Yahya, who is narrating from Abdur-Razzaaq, who's narrating from Ma'mar, who is one of Abdur-Razzaaq's constant shaykhs. He's probably his most important shaykh, who narrated from Qatada. Qatada, of course, was Qatada ibn Di'ama, one of the great scholars of tafsir and hadith from the tabi'een of Iraq, I believe from Kufa, or may have been Basra. So Qatada said, and this is where our isnad ends, so he's a tabi'i. It is the day Allah judges mankind, that is al-ibad, the slaves. He judges al-ibad regarding their deeds. So Maliki Yawm al-Din. So he's actually giving a tafsir of Yawm al-Din. And then regarding Allah's statement, غَيْرَ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ, Abdullah bin Shaqiq reported from someone who heard it from the Prophet ﷺ while he was on his horse at Wadi al-Qura. A man from Bani al-Qeen asked him, Messenger of Allah, who are these? And he said, these are those who have incurred wrath. And he pointed to the Jews. Then he asked, who are these? He said, they are the Dhalin, the astray. That is the Christians. And it was actually the way Abdur-Razzaaq transmitted it, it was split into 2 narrations. The first part starts out the same, that he's on a horse, and then this man asks him, who are these? And he says, it's the Maghdubi alayhim, and he pointed toward the Jews. And then there's another narration where the man asks him, who are these? And he says, they are al-Dhalin, and he meant the Christians. From this narration, you get a sense that, as is not uncommon with narrations, that the narrator chose to narrate certain things from the incident that just barely give you a glimpse of what was actually going on. You want to have more information, but it's not there. I mean, it could be that there is that there are other narrations, and if you go dig and dig and dig and dig, that you'll find little pieces from that mosaic that, when you put them all together, it'll give you a fuller picture of what was actually happening. But one gets the sense that there's something missing there that one would like to know. So that's all that Abdur-Razzaaq has to say about Surah Al-Fatiha. And if we look at the Tafsir of Sufyaan al-Thawree, and these are tafsirs that are they've been published and they're available. Sufyaan al-Thawree has nothing to say about Surah Al-Fatiha. So let's look at what he has to say about Surah Al-Baqarah. First of all, we have his tafsir, his comment about the opening. He said that 4 verses were revealed at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah describing the believers, 3 verses describing the disbelievers, and 13 verses describing the hypocrites. And then we again have a statement from Sufyaan in which he said that with regard to verse number 7, the companions of Allah's Messenger used to recite the verse, عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ وَعَلَى سَمْعِهِمْ وَعَلَى أَبْصَارِهِمْ غِشَاوَةٌ. Allah has sealed their hearing and their hearts, and over their vision there's a veil. This is somewhat cryptic, when one wonders what exactly, what was he getting at there? Perhaps there's variant recitations, but it's not clarified. In verse 19, we're starting to get actually some reports here. Sufyaan reported from Abu Haytham, from Sa'id ibn Jubair, regarding Allah's statement, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, أو كصيب من السماء, or like a rainstorm from the sky. He said, صيب من السماء is سحاب فيه مطر, a cloud containing rain. So he's just explaining the meaning of certain words that may have been less than obvious. The meaning was less than obvious to some listeners. With regard to verse 21, Sufyaan reported from Abu Nujayh, from Mujahid, regarding Allah's statement, يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. He said, تطيعون. So if we look at the translation, O mankind, worship your Lord who created you and those before you, that you may become righteous. So in other words, in order that you become obedient. Although the verb would be more literally, in order that you obey. With regard to verse 22, Sufyaan reported from Mujahid regarding Allah's statement, فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا, so do not set up rivals to Allah. He said, أَنْدَادًا means عُدَلَا, and equals or counterparts. وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ, he said about that, and when you know, the translation, وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ, when you know. He said, وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّهُ وَاحِدٌ فِي التَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ. When you know, O people of the book, that he is one in the Torah and the Gospel. And verse 24, Sufyaan, again, this is a direct statement from Sufyaan. He said regarding Allah's statement, وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةِ, the fire whose fuel is men and stones. He said stones of sulfur. And then he quoted Ibn Masud. He said, Abdullah bin Masud said, Kibrit Ahmar, red sulfur. And then finally, we'll make do with this. Verse 25, Sufyaan said regarding Allah's statement, وَأُتُوبِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا, this is regarding the fruits given to the people in paradise. It is given to them in resemblance. So Sufyaan said their color is the same, but the tastes, the flavors are different have various flavors. So, in other words, they look the same, but they taste different. So that's two examples of tafsir that are almost virtually purely tafsir bil-ma'thur. Now, if we look at the tafsir of the Marwiyat of Imam Ahmad in tafsir. Now, this is a book that's been only recently published. It was published in the 90s. And it was actually 1994. It's a compilation by a teacher, a professor at in the College of Qur'an at the Islamic University of Medina. Marwiyat al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal Tafsir. The compiler's name is Hikmat Bashir Yassin, and it was published in Riyadh by Maktabat al-Mu'ayyad. The project was funded and supported by IIIT in Herndon, Virginia, International Institute for Islamic Thought, which may surprise some because one gets the sense that they're interested in al-maqasid and some sort of rationalist reinterpretation of fiqh, things like that. But this is something that they put emphasis and importance on, which may give you a bit of a other facet of their outlook and their concerns. Anyway, this scholar, Hikmat Bashir, he starts his introduction to the book. He starts it off by talking about a narration attributed to a scholar named Ibn al-Munadi, that Imam Ahmad, one of his works was a book on tafsir that was transmitted by his son Abdullah and consisted of approximately 120,000 narrations. Now, the Musnad is only about 30,000 narrations, which will give you some sense of how large the book was. And the Musnad, one of the famous editions of it, is a 6-volume work. So this would be 4 times as big. And the tafsir of al-Thawree is, according to Hikmat Bashir, about 50,000 narrations, and that's a huge multi-volume work. So this would also be quite large. Now, the tafsir of al-Thawree has a lot of things in it besides narration. So if Imam Ahmad's tafsir was only narration, then it may not have been as large as the tafsir of al-Thawree. Now, the first thing that we have to be clear about is that this tafsir that was attributed to Imam Ahmad, as far as we know, doesn't exist today. However, there are references to it by scholars besides Ibn al-Munadi, Ibn al-Nadim in al-Fihrist, Ibn Taymiyyah in al-Fatawa, and in Dar' al-Ta'arud bayn al-Aqli wal-Naql, or Naqli wal-Aql, and Ibn al-Qayyim. They all mentioned the existence of this book, and Ibn al-Qayyim, he stated explicitly that he saw a small portion of it consisting of 9 pages. Ibn Hajar quoted from it in Fath al-Bari. Now, by the time of al-Dhahabi, there was no... Dhahabi never saw a copy of it, and he actually expressed doubts that there really ever was such a book. And Hikmat Bashir spent a few pages parrying al-Dhahabi's arguments, but the fact remains that the book doesn't exist as far as we know anymore. And so what Hikmat Bashir went about doing was trying to reconstruct a book of this type from other works. And he made the observation. He said, okay, first, he said there are three types of works that he referred to pull out these narrations. One was other works by Imam Ahmad himself. And he made an interesting observation. He said scholars of that era, when they put together a tafsir, it frequently had a great overlap with other works that they did. So, for instance, Abdur-Razzaaq, whose tafsir we just looked at, he said you can find a very large number of the narrations from his tafsir in his work al-Musannaf, which is a book of athar. The tafsir of al-Thawree, he said you can find many of the narrations in his book Tahdhib al-Athar. And the tafsir of al-Baghawi, he said many of the narrations that he put in his tafsir are also there in Sharh al-Sunnah, and so on. So he looked at Imam Ahmad's other books that have survived, and he pulled out anything from them that related to tafsir. And then next he looked at the works of students of Imam Ahmad. And there are numerous books called Masail al-Imam Ahmad, the questions put to Imam Ahmad. And there's at least 9 of them printed, each by a different student, one by his son Abdullah, one by his son Saleh, one by Abu Dawood, the famous hadith scholar, and 6 others besides. So he culled narrations related to tafsir from those books. And then this third tier of sources were works by authors who reported from Imam Ahmad by an intermediary. And so then after gathering these narrations, each one on an index card, he arranged them according to subject matter, in other words, from Al-Fatiha to An-Nas, surah by surah. And then he checked every narration to see who else had narrated it. And then he went through a process of trying to determine the authenticity of each narration, based substantially on the statements of early scholars and some latter-day scholars such as Ahmad Shakir and Al-Albani. And finally, he made indexes of the verses and the narrations for each volume. I believe it's a 4-volume work. Now, he also dealt with a statement that's attributed to Imam Ahmad. This is something he dealt with in the introduction. He said Imam Ahmad attributed to him that he said there are 3 things that have no basis: tafsir, maghazi, and malahim. Maghazi is accounts of the battles, of the expeditions of the Prophet ﷺ, and malahim is, I believe, would refer to battles that are precursors to the Day of Judgment. And in other words, predictions about future battles in hadith literature. Now, this statement was collected by Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi with an isnad containing a narrator whose reliability is difficult to determine. However, you have various scholars who treated the statement as being authentic, and then they tried to explain, well, what did he mean by that? And Al-Khatib's interpretation is that these fields attracted scholars or authors who were not very reliable. And so he was actually talking about some works in each field. Ibn Taymiyyah, he favored a variant explanation that most of the narrations in those topics, or on those topics, are mursal, that the chain of narration is not a full connected chain of narration, and therefore they're not musnad.